Well, I have the great pleasure of talking with my old friend Harry Kendall um, today. And um, Harry, what year did you come to Mowgli?
Um, so what year did you come to Mowgli? This would
I
been
came 1963 is the year that I came. Mr. Hart's first year as director.
uh-huh. So I'd say I guess I was 2 years later.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
something like 65.
Uh-huh.
Could be 64. But I was never conscious of Mr. Hart being new. That never occurred to me as a youth. He was
Right,
just a
right.
guy.
And there's some family history with your family, right? From with
Yes,
Mowgli.
just one uncle. And there's a family name that runs in the family, Judd. And the reason my older brother is named Judson is because our uncle Judd, my mother's only brother, died in World War II. So when they had a baby boy, it was instead of naming them Junior, which I'm named, they got named Judd got named Judd because it was a honor memoriam of my Uncle Judd. And I can remember at Mowgli going into the library and finding the howls from his years and reading what people said about him and stuff. It was pretty thrilling to
Yeah.
sense that connection.
And I've over the years there have been a few uh, pieces written about uh, people who died during the Second World War. Um, did they know? Did they know about him?
I haven't seen those pieces, so I can't say.
Okay,
His last name was Conant.
okay. I
Judson
guess
Conant.
I'll check because I think James Hart wrote something even fairly recently. So
Huh?
I'll check on that. The of course the Gilbert Payne organ at the chapel was given after he was killed
Uh-huh.
in action, and so there are certain things that you sort of uh, I guess latch on to because they're associated with other things at Mowgli. So you came because your uncle Judd and your brother Judd
Yeah. And
both
then
were at Mowgli.
subsequently my brother Sam followed.
Right, right. And what's Sam doing these days?
Sam lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The lure of the East Coast, we were a St. Louis family. The lure of the East Coast was so strong, I blame that on Mowgli. That that um three of us, 3 out of 5 ended up in the on the East Coast, two in New York and no, 4 out of 5. Two in New York, my sister Elizabeth and me, my brother Sam in Cambridge, and my brother Judd in Bangor, Maine.
And you divide your time between Massachusetts and Lancaster, or are you full time somewhere now?
I'm not full time anywhere because the pandemic screwed up any notions of what's your primary residence if you had a place to escape to from the city. So I divide my time pretty much evenly between New York City and not Massachusetts, but
Oh,
Columbia County, New
okay,
York,
New York,
near,
right?
near to the town of Hudson, New York. And then in the summer, we divide ourselves 3 ways because we have a family home in Lancaster, but it's just a seasonal camp on Martin Meadow Pond.
hmm Huh. It's hard to keep up, but I do remember now that I saw you when I was in New York many years ago. So
Uh-huh.
I should have remembered that it was New York and not Cambridge.
Well, that would have been impressive had you remembered.
I think we had dinner with Doug Warwick, as I recall. It
Ah,
was,
yeah,
or maybe
you're,
we just met with him.
you're spurring a memory, but it's not a precise one. So I
Yeah,
can't contradict
right, right.
your vague memory.
Okay, so now let's even make it harder on you and talk about your memories from your first years as camp. What dorm did you come in?
So I came in Tumai, and
Okay.
then didn't do Baloo, and was Aquila, and then I didn't do Panther, and I was in Den. So we were alternating years at Mowgli with full summer in Lancaster, where my grandfather was.
Huh. And were you doing that because the having all those boys at camp was too expensive for your
Well,
family, or?
that's true. There were five kids, actually six, because we had a developmentally challenged sister named Faith. But so there were six kids in our family, and um, our parents probably, to save money, but also to instill a sense of commitment, said that we had to save our allowance and money earned from lawn mowing or anything like that, and help pay for camp. So we would basically save for 2 years, and that would enable us to get enough money to contribute to the cost of Mowgli.
Wow.
So that's an interesting memory, because it probably did make us that much more appreciative of it as a privilege to go, rather than being shipped off to summer camp for whatever reason.
Yeah, and for you to be enthused enough about returning that you were willing to do that as well.
Yeah, I have no
Yeah,
memory of how much we contributed.
it doesn't
It was
matter.
no, it was probably a token amount, but it seemed like a choice we had to make, and it couldn't be
Sure.
done every year.
Wow, that's amazing. So, what do you remember from those early years?
I feel like I slipped right into in a time we now know, looking back with the benefit of hindsight, was increasingly, um, the counterculture was growing, the thought of not being conformist or whatever. But in Mowgli, I slipped right into the uniforms, the rules, the somewhat um, military reference organization. It wasn't really military, because it was Kipling, really, above all, but still there was a certain amount of muster up on the parade grounds and whatnot.
Hmm.
But that, um, you know, it's interesting that we never looked back and said, wow, what was that all about? It was just perfect for to be in a different place, a sort of universe of its own, with its own rules and regulations, and then just, it was so magical. And I say that because I've thought about it some, because I became a counselor, a junior counselor, and then a counselor. Um, and it was up to me to enforce those regulations. And of course, one of the years I was either junior counselor or counselor was the summer of Woodstock. And myself and another counselor decided we would hitchhike to Woodstock and pooled our days off. We didn't make it, and it's lucky we didn't, because we wouldn't have made it back. But uh, so that sets the times, and it was up to me to enforce the Mowgli code, and my heart was not as much in it, but I knew in my heart that it was a good thing, because I had, those had been my rules, and when I was a camper, and they didn't feel constrictive, they just felt like good structure.
Okay, so Harry Kendall, here's your test. Report for duty. Do you remember how you reported at the end of your duty?
No.
Oh, you
Did we
don't?
salute? Did we
What?
salute?
Yeah, you saluted and said,
Yeah.
"Sir, I have done my duty to the best of my ability."
Yes, you're just that, that is not something I had dwelled on, but that is fantastic. I've done my duty to the best of my ability.
And then the counselor saluted back and said, "Dismissed." And boy,
Well,
I am with you when I mean, we were living in countercultural times that I won't even get into how much they are like today. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's uncanny. There's even a
Uh-huh.
Robert Kennedy running for president.
Uh-huh.
You know, the so anyway, but I was in the same position. I was, you know, I was I had gone off to private school that had totally flipped me from being a conservative country boy to being anti-war and all this.
Uh-huh.
And so here I was at Mowgli, but it just never. I never had trouble with it, but I always sort of smiled when I when I did all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
But still, we loved it.
yeah. Well, it was partly just the structure of it all, you know. Yeah, providing that kind of structure in our lives was a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it enabled you to excel, I
Yeah.
thought. Um, I mean, there was a funny thing with our neither none of my brothers, and certainly not myself, were thought of as great athletes, although Judd became a pretty strong runner. It was ranked very high in Maine or the New England states. I'm not sure which, but we didn't think of ourselves as excelling in the athletic area. But in Mowgli, we were killers. We could win the high jump. We could, and that had to do with just a place you felt completely willing to test yourself and stretch out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to get back to some of the trips and stuff that you took at in the younger dorms and even in the older dorms. But now that you've already brought up the Woodstock trip, fill in that a little bit because it's so interesting.
Um, so it didn't end up being a Woodstock trip because it was
Hmm.
Nat Hemenway and myself, and we decided that we were going to Woodstock. Nat had already said at the beginning of the summer that he had a new thought that anyone who said Bob Dylan couldn't sing, that they didn't like, if they said Bob Dylan writes good songs but he can't sing, he would just wouldn't give him the time of day. It was a battle line being drawn. So anyway, we decided to hitchhike to Woodstock, and we headed off and we stuck our thumbs out, and the first ride we got was heading toward southern New Hampshire, and we had already been getting concerned about the amount of time it would take to hitchhike there and back, and we decided we just and there were some reports that it was very crowded and a little out of control. So we went down to Hampton Bay and hung out on the beach for a day, and then came back.
But you had when you set out, you were headed for Woodstock.
We
You
were headed
just
for Woodstock, just thumbs out in East Hebron, New Hampshire.
Oh boy. Well, Nat was quite a guy. I've tried to get in touch with him. I haven't had any luck, but um,
So maybe someone will say, "Hey, your name got mentioned in a
yeah,
recent."
that's right. And maybe they could tell him that I sang lay lady lay lay lady lay. Yeah, it's funny. I thought that Dylan couldn't sing at first, and then I grew to love it.
Oh,
Yeah. So even some of us, even people like me, are educable for him.
yeah. I still never hold it. It's a rough edge kind of voice. It's a matter of taste.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
But to me, he's a complete artist.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's just a lot like John Prine, it's an acquired taste.
Yeah. Although once you acquire John Prine's taste, you never go back. He's he's such a great of all the musicians, there's so many musicians from our youth. When someone dies, you gauge how much it hits you or doesn't. And when John Prine died, I thought, boy, that really hits hard.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yep. So, okay, so do you remember any of your trips from the early years?
I mean, hiking trips,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, you know, the only trip I really have memories of is the Mount Washington Range trip. What's it called? It was an honor to be,
Right. The Washington squad.
yeah, on the Washington squad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, that ridge starting in Madison going over to Mount Washington is such an otherworldly environment.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Uh, I loved every second of the Mount Washington squad trip. And I really
Ah,
can remember it. It was the Pundersons, I think, were counselors leading the Mount Washington squad.
wow. That's that's a great memory. That's such a the presidential range is just such an iconic place, you know. Um, so when you were little, you went to Belle Island, probably in the war canoe. Did
Yeah, I have a memory of early entrepreneurship. There was the highest place you could jump off of on Belle Island, of a
Mhm.
cliff on Cliff Isle.
Cliff, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we were up at the highest place you would consider. And maybe you were even there, but I sort of knew I would be willing to jump. I'm not a person who has much of a fear of heights, and I started betting that people would say, I'll bet you my desserts for a day or dessert for a week if you jump. And I gathered in memory probably exaggerates, but I gathered quite a few desserts and then jumped. And then so then every evening for a while I was sort of like I had currency. I could trade back a dessert for something else.
Ah.
So
Oh yeah.
those war canoe trips to Belle Isle and to Cliff Isle were great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the whole
Um,
presence of Mowgli focused on the mountains, but then on the lake and the emphasis on crew is a really interesting way to structure a camp.
yeah.
The teamwork that involved being a crew member really has really stuck with me. And the the camping ethos of glorifying the wilderness, participating in making of the trails, and um, there was probably something we repeated, like your I've done my duty to the best of my ability, but the whole dictum of always leave a campsite better than the way you found it, to
Yeah.
me, completely became words to live by, a metaphor endlessly applicable to anything.
Right,
You know,
right. And that environmental ethos you eventually carried forward in your architectural work, don't you think?
yeah, it's true that in my architecture work, there's two distinctions my firm has, and one of which was being a very early adopter of environmental standards or environmentally sensitive architecture. We did the first LEED Platinum building in New York City, and we've gone on to do quite a few LEED rated, including 3 other Platinum rated buildings, which is tough,
Yeah.
and an honor to be hired for by in architecture. This is my profession. We hadn't introduced that in this interview, but I became an architect in New York City, and one learns early that it takes a good client to make a good building, besides a good architect. And so it's a catch-22. If you want to do environmentally sensitive buildings, you can't browbeat your client into doing it. You can, but if you do enough so you get hired for that reason, then you look better and better. So we managed to cross leap over that hurdle that we were involved enough in environmental issues that we would get hired for things that had that as a goal from the beginning, and then we did them well.
And did it all start with that one building in New York, or how did you sort of evolve to that?
Yeah. It, you know, when I say that we were involved enough in environmental issues, it was, you know, going to lectures, going to AIA, which is the American Institute of Architects, the AIA symposium, and demonstrating that we were interested in staying abreast of developing technology. But then we got awarded a job at the Queens Botanical Garden in New York that had decided to brand itself as the environment, the botanical garden where you learn about being stewards of the environment, which arguably you do in any botanical garden, but some botanical gardens are more Victorian, almost, you'd say, in that they're specimens from around the world. And the Queen's Botanical Garden decided to be more of an indigenous plant environment, so that they thought a building that was an innovator and you know, ahead of the curve would express their mission well, and then that came to pass. So then when that building was done and it got many awards, it made the path easier to do more environmentally thoughtful buildings.
Right.
So I was hiking in northern Italy, and I ran into an Italian architect, and we were talking about various buildings we'd done. When I said that one, he said, "That building influenced me so deeply. It was really, you know, it was a call to action." And so that's an exciting moment.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so we traced the line back to Mowgli and sitting at the Chapel of the Pines, and, you know, getting a reverence for nature that can carry you through even when you choose to live in a dense, unnatural urban area, to be thoughtful in that way.
That is an amazing story, Harry Kendall. I am so glad that I screwed up our first phone call so that we had to delve further into your life here as we talk.
I'm glad too. No, the first phone call, I'm glad. I was sort of fortuitous that you didn't record it correctly, because it was also because we were in Den together, if I'm not mistaken. And anyway, because we were close in age and at
Yes.
Mowgli, it was a time of getting reacquainted. Also, it was easier to talk about back and forth, not like an interview. So
Right.
got that out of the way.
But to run into somebody that you had never met before in Italy, and then to begin to find out that you had areas of commonality, and then to have them tell you that how much they admired a building that you had designed. I mean,
Very exciting. Yeah.
that's like the ultimate experience in terms of professional experience, you know.
I agree. And thank you for noticing that.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't go fishing for that one. You didn't go fishing for that compliment. That compliment just came right out of the blue, and it was a 500-pound tuna. It's great. Oh, I love that. So, what staff particularly stick in your mind from your early years, or
Well,
from your
this
youth?
one, we talked about a little earlier, and I'm really happy to talk about it again. To me, the towering staff member that really affected me was Jim West, otherwise known as Wahanik. And the Mowgli tradition of Wapanaya, and then one of his sons there, and the curtain in the, what was the Gray Brothers Hall? Is
Gray
that
Brothers, yeah.
yeah. that was, it's sensitive territory now, the cultural appropriation of indigenous people, but at Mowgli, one sensed a tradition that was ingrained in the camp's tradition, and was one of great respect.
Yeah. And I know that Jim appreciates that. I think a lot of that cultural appropriation stuff uh, you know, is overboard. I
Seriously
mean,
overboard, and one can and one references Mowgli to check that.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. So one of the things that I don't think I told you was that when I was growing up, I always had this kind of internal thing about Native American people, and you know, and one day when my dad was like 65 years old, he sat me down and he said, "I know that you have this thing, and I'm going to tell you why." And,
Uh-huh.
and I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "My father was half Abenaki and half Iroquois, and he made me promise that I would not share that with anyone else because we were hiding in place for all
Hmm.
those years."
Wow.
And so one of the first things that I did to try and figure out what that meant for me spiritually and in every other way was to go see Jim in New Mexico and spend a few days with him.
Yeah, we
And
touched on that last time, but
yeah,
I hadn't heard that your father told you and said that I wasn't to tell a soul.
right, right. So
Incredible.
anyway, I find out when I'm, almost 50 myself about this. So it was quite a thing. And so, when people talk about cultural appropriation, I, I, I sort of wonder where I fit into
Uh-huh.
that. And that's why I believe a lot of it's nonsense, just be who you are, let it be. And as the Beatles said, let it be.
Yeah. No,
So,
I respect that. But it's interesting that, well, it's just an interesting topic.
yeah. So Jim was a big factor for you.
Yeah. I mean, I explained it to myself, but I loved archery, but I think he was a very compelling figure, and a sense of, um, one of the reasons that there was a period of time in our nation's history where we glorified um, the Native Americans' prowess in with hunting and horse riding and bow and arrows, was that, the increasing industrialization and harkening back to a more a purer time where we were aligned with natural forces. And you could say that's highly ironic, because this was, on the one hand, your father had to say, I would never tell anyone. On the other hand, we glorified uh, the Native American ethos and skills.
Right.
So um, that shows what a fascinating and sensitive topic it is. But there at Mowgli, you had Jim West, who was a wonderful archer and just a wonderful, warm person. And you felt
Yes.
that, you didn't feel any lack of authenticity there.
Right.
I used to gaze at his we would repair arrows at night up in the archery loft. That was one of the things I did with him, and he had a picture of his girlfriend on the desk, and I would just look at look at her picture and thought, that is the luckiest woman in the world.
Yeah. Wow. Have you spoken with Jim?
Yeah, he visited me in New York once.
Oh,
And
good.
we corresponded a bit, though I
Yeah.
haven't, it's been years since I kept in touch.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well,
He's
uh,
he, he's still alive, right?
oh yeah, and doing well. I mean, he's had some challenges. He got thrown from a horse about 8 months ago, and
Oh, wow.
for a while he was in tough physical condition, but he's made a recovery.
Cool.
So
Hey,
here he is,
his
still riding.
the email address I had for him was with his organization Futures for Children, but
Oh, okay.
that's a long time ago.
I'll send you his new
Send me his
his
contact
email. Yeah.
information.
Yeah, because he would love to talk to you. I
Yeah,
know.
I will email him as soon as you.
Yeah. All right. Very cool. Um,
So,
so
so that was the number, and then I became yeah, I was the archery counselor for a summer,
I
um,
remember that. Yeah.
and I once split a student's arrow. I we were playing a game where they would fire the arrow and I would fire it right behind them,
Uh-huh.
and I literally split the arrow
You
like a
wow.
circus trick.
That's pretty impressive.
I've not kept those skills up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
New York City is not a big archery place.
yeah, no, no. So the some of the other staff that you remember well.
Phil Hart was such an interesting and sometimes odd personality,
Uh-huh.
but um, I think I told you last time that I was present when he had an epileptic seizure and we were on the raft, and I don't think I was one of the ones who jumped in and saved him, but it was an indelible memory of seeing him and wondering, people thinking he was joking, and then
Right.
pulling him out. But um, he was, not just being the son of the director, but a very present staff member, and so obviously intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah. Was
We talked last time about the Indian counselor whose name again who taught
Shad
us.
Shad Faraki.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And yeah, I still have a basic understanding of the rules of cricket because of him teaching us.
Ah, you know, I really liked Shad Faraki when I was a kid. I loved to listen to him talk about, mongooses fighting with
Uh-huh.
cobras and all those things that came from the Jungle Book and all that. But, looking back on all that, what really strikes me is, it was only a couple of years later that Mr. Hart uh, got Junior Bender to come to Mowgli
Uh-huh.
to break the color barrier, but he had already broken it with Shad Faraki and Jim
Uh-huh.
West, and
Uh-huh.
uh, he just he just sort of his heart was so good that
That it infused the whole camp with a feeling of acceptance of differences, I think.
yeah, yeah, it's really true. I mean, I don't know if you uh, when Junior came to Mowgli, somebody had to go to New York City to meet him when he flew into New York, stay with him for the night, and then bring
Uh-huh.
him up to Mowgli. And Mr. Hart asked Stuart Klein
Oh,
to
who
do
was
that.
another great counselor.
Yeah, this little short Jewish guy
Uh-huh.
going down to New York City and hanging out with Junior Bender, a little black kid from Piney Woods, Mississippi.
Uh-huh.
And it was when Stuart told me this story, I was rolling. And
That is a great scenario. That's like a screenplay, huh?
yeah, yeah. They went to a ball game and they went to a wrestling to see wrestling together, but they got at one point, Gaius Merwin's father
Uh-huh.
had to actually come to the hotel where they were registered because the hotel tried to refuse them lodging in New
Wow.
York.
Yep. There you go. It seems like a distant past, but it's not that distant.
Yeah, not so distant. Yep. Yeah.
I remember
So,
Charlie Walbridge very well too. And of course, he's awfully active in the Mowgli community
yeah.
still.
He's such an iconic guy, you know. Yep. So there were quite a number of those people over the years, you know, the Pop and Chalk brothers and
Yeah.
uh,
Andy and what's
Paul. Yep.
Andy and Paul Poppinchock.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I feel particularly lucky to have been there when all of these people that we've just talked about were.
Yeah, when you range over a few of these figures, Stuart Klein, Jim West, even Nat Hemenway, you know, younger, but there's a lot of this was a lot of critical thinking going on.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't say it was a intellectually oriented summer camp, but you had people who were really insightful
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah. It's really
And
true.
and then I have to say, this is not pandering to my interviewer, but in terms of the a spirit of kindness, you might say that Mr. Hart had a big heart, but your mother was was an incredibly um, effective in the Maui community of making you feel that if you got sick, there was this, not just if you got sick, just she was around and she was extraordinarily kind.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That uh eh,
And I wasn't always the healthiest person. I still am not. I get, if someone around me gets sick, I get sick. And maybe it's psychosomatic sometimes, but I just don't have the strongest immune system, I think. I'm generally pretty healthy, but anyway, so I was in the infirmary a few times during any
well,
given.
you know, I think he was a few years ahead of us. But when were you at Mowgli when Dave Rittenhouse got hurt on the Mount Washington squad?
Yes.
Do you
Yes.
remember that?
Yeah.
And the trip master back then was a guy named John Harmon.
Uh-huh.
And um, John Harmon to this day credits my mother with convincing him that he should become a doctor uh,
Wow.
as a result of how he handled that accident. And now his grandsons, he had a bunch of kids that went to Mowgli, but he credits my mom with that. So it's pretty cool.
Uh,
And do you remember the Damasi boys?
yeah, they're not well.
Yeah, yeah. I only bring that up because I finally tracked them down, and I'm gonna try and call them tomorrow, and I just thought that it would be fun to actually have two or three of them all on together if I could convince
Uh-huh.
them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I think you were 1 year ahead of me.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
As soon as I said we were in Den together, I thought, no, it didn't fit right.
Yeah.
But I think we were on the Red Racing crew together.
We were. Yes,
Yeah.
because I was on for 2 years. That was the year. That was the year that we got pushed into the shallow area. Do you remember
Yeah, it
that?
slowed us down.
That's right. We
And
got
we
we
made a
got rooked.
furious comeback, but we didn't
Yeah,
win.
that's right. That's right.
Richard,
It's-
Richard Morgan was our stroke, and he was
yeah.
really strong,
Yes, he
um,
was.
but not always the easiest to follow.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is so much fun. That was yeah, I don't think any of us who were in that boat ever got over that.
No.
I mean, you could feel that boat just it was going so fast and you could feel it when it hit that shallow water, just slow right down.
Yeah. That race is really indelible. And
Yep.
I said before that how the teamwork of crew was pervaded the camp, or pervaded my impression of the camp. Um, I think that race was, when I think back of the times I was fully engaged in something, giving action every last ounce of effort. I think back to that. We were just, and we lost, but still, it was a moment
Yeah.
of pure working as a team, trying our best to live up to our obligation to win for
Yep.
the Red Racing Group.
Yep. Yep. We were in the zone. We just, yeah, I mean, it really was extraordinary. And I think actually losing the race was probably better for our personal growth than winning it. Um,
No
because you had
way.
to,
No way. If
no,
I
okay.
if we won, I'd be a
Yeah.
titan of industry today.
Oh, gosh. So, did you make the inner circle?
Yes, but
It's
I
not,
don't. I've lost my hat that had all the ribbons on them, so I can't. I cannot remember what ribbons I had and didn't. But I loved getting ribbons, so I was in
yeah.
the inner circle. Yeah,
All
and
right.
um,
Even even missing two important years when you were there,
yeah, I had to
you
play catch up
managed.
ball, but I
Yeah.
was I was very devoted to getting in the inner circle.
Yeah. What was it like with Judd being there with you? I mean, he was, you were an incredibly accomplished kid. Judd was like, equally accomplished. And
I would say
so,
he was more accomplished. Yeah.
well, I mean, it was different, but he was a really popular guy. That's for
Uh-huh.
sure. And so you came in behind him. Was there like competition between the two of you, or did you just feel comfort?
No, he's 4 years older than me. I always felt like if we'd been 3 years separate, there might have been competition, but to me, he was just, he was someone I idolized, and
Yeah.
I was pretty happy to have him make a, make a reputation ahead of me, and then I could coast a little bit.
Huh. It's funny that you say that because of all the kids that were there when I was there were two guys that I idolized as well. One was Judd Kendall, and the other was Dave Rittenhouse.
Uh-huh.
Um, Maybe John Foyer too, because he was a great guy. John was, and but uh, yeah, I just you're right because he was considerably older than us. Uh, you looked at them differently, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember Myron? Did you ever have a relationship with Myron Braley?
No.
Okay. It- he was an interesting guy. Stuart Klein had this hugely funny relationship with Myron Braley, and he would come and tell me stories about
Huh.
things that Myron said to him or did with him. But Myron was quite a guy. I'll tell you, the one story that I would relay about Myron is that um, my first year as trip master, I was about to lead the Washington squad into the presidentials, and I was really full of myself, and I stopped in to pick some stuff up at the trip closet, and Myron was in sharpening an axe on that. He had this
Uh-huh.
big old wheel that he'd sharpen it
Uh-huh.
on. Yeah. And so I said I stopped in to say hello to him and told him we were headed out, and we got to the front door, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and he handed me a tarp, and he said, "You're going to need this." And
Uh-huh.
I looked up into the sky, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he pointed out these wisps, these little wispy clouds.
Wow.
He said, "There's a storm coming."
And did that come to
And
pass?
we got hit with the thunder and hailstorm from hell on the side of Washington. And if Myron hadn't given me that tarp, we would have been in trouble.
Huh.
It was amazing.
Great story.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we all have lots of those, but I remember Jim telling me the story about um, the Gibbs gun show, and how he I for it was Ivan Gibbs that put on the gun show, and
Uh-huh.
he had some guy fire a high powered weapon into a bucket of sand, and then he went over there and he reached in and he pulled out the lead from the
Uh-huh.
bucket,
Uh-huh.
and then he had Jim fire an arrow into that bucket, and it went all the way through.
Wow.
And he said, that was like you seeing the stopping power of an arrow under certain circumstances
Uh-huh.
was amazing.
Wow, that's really interesting on many levels. So as a good story of
Yep.
Jim being part of that demonstration, but as I wouldn't have thought that in terms of the physics.
Right. Yeah. No. So okay. So
Speaking of people who, I was
go ahead.
just today, I was watching on Instagram some, random reels, and there was Chris Hedges speaking so intelligently about Israel Palestine, and yeah, you could see the little boy in the man.
Yep. He has he is a man of great courage.
Yeah, who would have guessed?
No, and yeah, it's true. I mean, I over the years, I've wondered at the fact that this little nerdy kid ended up being this fearless war correspondent. I
Yeah,
mean, just
yeah.
fearless, and now he's a fearless intellectual.
Have you interviewed him?
Yes, yeah,
I should listen.
yeah. I'll send you a link for that as well. But yeah, he lives in New Jersey, but he spends time in the summer on the uh, you know, up in Maine. So
Uh-huh.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
we actually
interrupted you
went
with
for a
that.
hike together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was very nice. I've seen him
I
a
think I
couple of times.
think as a counselor, I may have been involved in coaxing him up a mountain, resisting it.
I wouldn't surprise me. So talk to me about, your sense of Mr. Hart.
Um, that's an interesting question because this is all rolled into looking back on Mowgli and thinking about it. I guess we knew then that he'd been in the CIA, but at least I knew later.
Hmm.
And what we started talking about practically in this interview was the contrasting the times and the rules at Mowgli. But Mr. Hart was it sort of perfectly embodies that. Someone who was obviously thoughtful and kind, but also um, never someone who would allow a rule to be broken.
Right, right,
Um, so I don't know, even as a counselor, I don't know how much real sense I had of him, except that he was so deeply trustworthy. You just knew that the camp was being managed well, and that when he sat around the campfire and weaved whatever story or talked about whatever he was going to talk about. It was so beautiful, and it was such a every night was a genuine I don't know, coming together and calling together the community. And
Yeah, yeah,
that's the result of Mr. Hart and his own interpretation of the Mowgli spirit.
right. I mean, when you say that, the word that comes to mind is gravitas. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that guy just, and grace.
Yeah.
He was quite a guy. Um, how do you, looking back on all of it, how do you think Mowgli impacted the person that Harry Kendall became? I mean,
Yeah, big question. You know, in every way almost. I mentioned the leave a camp site better than when you found it. And to me, that's one of the perfect embodiments. But also that spirit of community, the fact that you can create a world where, for yes, it's summer, so the weather is more beautiful, and everything, the struggles of being a camper in the outdoors in the summer are not fully indicative of life's struggles, but still what you came out of each summer feeling like you'd had a life-changing experience. And so the accumulation of several years of that um, really makes one a person who can trust their own instincts and relate to people in a genuine way. Um, I also had first cousins who went to Mowgli, Stuart Carruthers. Um,
oh, sure. Yep.
and there was one time when, well, after Mr. Hart, of course, it was clear that the directorship of Mowgli was going to be there was going to be a hire, or the board would choose somebody. And he called me and asked if I thought he should apply. I think he did. But I said, well, that's like saying you could become president of the United States. That's a position so exalted that you should apply, because I think that if you care about it that much, but wow, talk about scaling the heights.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's a roundabout way of answering your question, how to made, if to me, the idea of being the director of Mowgli was about as ambitious as you could get. It means that the Mowgli experience was one which was about as meaningful as you could get.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the,
It's beautifully put. I mean, you are a man of great accomplishment who looks back on, what most people would sort of shrug off if they didn't understand how much meaning we all attach to the place.
uh-huh.
Um, but it really has had an extraordinary effect on a lot of lives.
I haven't visited lately. Perhaps this summer I don't know if you get by during the summer much.
If I know you're going to be there, I'll come.
Let's communicate and see if there's one of the days of alumni coming to the camp.
Yeah,
It's high time to see each other.
I think so. Harry Kendall, what a joy to talk with you, my friend.
My pleasure entirely. Really nice to see you. And thanks for setting this up.
Good hunting, my friend. Bye.
Until the next time. Bye.